The animal moves, say, through a forest. You move through psychic, psychological, and mental areas in the same way. Through his senses, the animal gets messages from distant areas that he cannot directly perceive, and of which he is largely unaware, and so do you. The you that you consider yourself is never annihilated. Your consciousness is not snuffed out, nor is it swallowed, blissfully unaware of itself in some nirvana. You are as much a part of a nirvana now as you ever will be. To some extent, we have discussed your body and its composition of cells. All of the cells that now make up your physical form obviously exist at once. Imagine that you have many lives enduring in the same fashion. Instead of cells, then you have selves. I told you that each cell has its own memory. The self-memory is, of course, of far greater dimension. Think of the greater you. Call it the entity, if you want to, as forming a psychic structure quite as real as your physical one, but composed of many selves. As each cell in your body has its position within your corporeal space and boundaries, so each self within the entity is aware of its own quote-unquote time and dimension of activity. The body is a temporal structure. The cells, however, while a part of the body, are not aware of the entire dimension in which your consciousness dwells. They do not perceive all of the elements that are available even in three-dimensional experience. Yet your present consciousness, seemingly so much more sophisticated, physically rests upon cellular awareness. So the entity, or quote-unquote greater psychic structure of which you are a part, is aware of much larger dimensions of activity than you are, yet in the same way, its more sophisticated consciousness rests upon your own, and one is necessary to the other. In physical life, there is a lapse when messages leap the nerve ends. In other terms and on other levels, this was represented in that quote-unquote moment of reflection that took place as man's consciousness emerged from that of the animals. I did not say that man emerged from the animals. In still other terms and at different levels this lapse occurs. This moment of reflection extends itself, as the self leaps clear of physical form, even as the cell at one time deserts the body. In this regard now, and for the sake of our analogy only, think of the life of the self as one message leaping across the nerve cells of a multidimensional structure, again as real as your body, and consider it also a greater quote-unquote moment of reflection on the part of such a many-sided personality. I make these analogies because they are pertinent, yet I am aware that they can make you feel small or fear for your identity. You are more than a message, say, passing through the vast reaches of a super-self. You are not lost in the universe. In a book we must use words, but such analogies can, if you let them, conjure up within your imagination some feeling of your intimate relationship with all other reality. To some extent, the feeling of grace is your emotional recognition of the necessity, purpose, and freedom, the innate appreciation of your rightness and place in existence. Remember also, in your terms now, the great gulf that separates you as a self from those cells that physically compose you. Your own present identity contains the knowledge and quote-unquote memory of all those simultaneous existences, even as the cells in their way retain memory of all those physical structures which they have formed. Consciously, because of your time concepts, you will interpret those simultaneous lives in reincarnational terms, one seemingly before the other. Now, your conscious ideas, expectations, and beliefs direct the health and activity of the cells. The cells do not have free will in your terms. They have the innate capacity to form other organizations, but not while affiliated with you. To leave you, they must change their form. To some extent, you determine their quote-unquote good health within the framework of their nature. They also help maintain yours. In terms of consciousness, the entity or greater you knows as much more than you know as you know more than yourselves. You, however, do have free will, for while the entity's psychic structure can be compared to the body, it is a part of and inhabits far greater dimensions. All of this may seem to have little to do with your personal reality, yet your daily experience is as connected with yourself or entity as it is with the cells of your physical form. There is an obvious intimate relationship between each cell and another. There is a constant give and take and grouping of awareness within the body's own miraculous corporeal structure. Your idea of reality and its experience is much different than that of any cell, yet each is interconnected. A group of cells forms an organ. A group of selves forms a soul. I am not telling you that you do not have a soul to call your own. You are a part of your soul. It belongs to you and you to it. You dwell within its reality as a cell dwells within the reality of an organ. The organ is temporal in your terms. The soul is not. The cell is material in your terms. The self is not. The entity, then, or greater self, is composed of souls. Because the body exists in time and space, the organs have specific purposes. They help keep the body alive, and they must stay, quote-unquote, in place. The entity has its existence in multitudinous dimensions, its souls free to travel within boundaries that would seem infinite to you. As the smallest cell within your body participates to its degree in your daily experience, so does the soul to an immeasurably greater extent share in the events of the entity. You possess within yourself all of those potentials in which consciousness creatively takes part. The cell does not need to be consciously aware of you in order to fulfill itself, even though your expectations of health largely influence its existence. But your recognition of the soul and entity can help you direct energies from those other dimensions into your daily life. You, dear reader, are in the process of expanding your psychic structure, of becoming a conscious participant with the soul, in certain terms of becoming what your soul is. As cells multiply and grow within their own nature and physical framework, so do selves, quote-unquote, evolve in terms of value fulfillment. Souls are also creative psychic structures, ever-changing, and yet always retaining individual integrity, and all are dependent one upon the other. Souls make up the life of the entity in those terms, yet the entity is quote-unquote more than the soul is. Now, when you are aware of the existence of the entity and of the soul, you can consciously draw upon their greater energy, understanding, and strength. It is inherently available, but your conscious intent brings about certain changes in you that automatically trigger such benefits. The results will be felt down to the smallest cells within your body, and will affect even the most seemingly mundane events of your daily life. You are growing in consciousness, therefore. Using it expands its capabilities. It is not a thing, but an attribute and characteristic. That is why your understanding and desire are so important. The processes initiated are beyond your normal awareness. They occur automatically with your intent if you do not block them through fear, doubt, or opposing beliefs. Imagine yourself as a portion of an invisible universe, but one in which all the stars and planets are conscious and full of inexhaustible energy. You are aware of this. Think of this universe as having the form of a body. If you want to, visualize its outline brilliant against the sky. The suns and planets are your cells, each filled with energy and power, but awaiting your direction. Then see this image exploding into your own consciousness, which is unbelievably bright. Realize that it is a portion of a far greater multidimensional structure, spread out in an even richer dimension. Feel the entity sending you energy as you send energy to your cells. Let it fill your being, and then direct it, physically, any place within your body that you choose. If instead there is a physical event that you strongly desire, then use that energy to imagine its actual occurrence as vividly as you can. If you follow these directions and understand the meaning for them as given, you will find the results most startling and effective. Energy may be directed to any portion of the body, and if you do not block its actions by disbeliefs, the portion will be cured. Remember, however, if you hold the belief that you are a sickly person, that can hinder you. In that case, then, to change that particular kind of belief is your first concern. One of the purposes of this book is to tell you that no one is born to be a sickly person, so reading it can help you there. In your terms, if you believe that you chose illness to compensate for a past life deficiency, then it will help you to realize that you form your reality now in your present, and can therefore change it. Later, we will discuss such matters as birth defects. Here, we are speaking about conditions that can be physically corrected, but not the growth of an arm if you were born without one, for example, or the correction of other lacks in the body at birth. Your body is the basic product of your creativity on a physical level. From its integrity, all other constructions in your lifetime must come. Your greatest artistic endeavors must arise out of the soul in flesh. You create yourselves on a daily basis, changing your form according to the incalculable richness of your multitudinous abilities. So, out of the soul's resplendent psychic richness do you spring with your free will and desire. You, in turn, create other living creatures. You also produce forms of art, fluid living constructs that you do not understand in terms of societies and civilizations, and all of these flow through your alliance with flesh and blood. This creativity, the strongest force within all reality, reaches from sources we have not as yet discussed in this book, down to the smallest atom and molecule. Your health is an extension of your creativity. So is your relationship with your mate, your boss, and the kinds of events with which you are uniquely familiar. I can see that my analogy comparing the soul to an organ within a multidimensional psychic structure of the entity is confusing you. We will clear it up by comparing the same properties, changing the word soul to quote-unquote oversoul. As mentioned earlier, and simply following the analogy, each self has its own soul within the oversoul, and the oversoul is itself a part of the entity's multidimensional structure. All of this material, I understand, is complicated. It is also difficult to explain. It becomes highly pertinent, however, in many instances of your lives, and affects your daily being and experience. I gave the information in this chapter purposely when I did, knowing that our visitor from the psychiatric clinic would be here. I want to discuss the state of grace in some detail and in different ways throughout this book. The young man who came here described in some detail the way in which LSD is used in therapy work with patients. The psychologists hope to bring about a cure for various emotional difficulties, to literally induce a quote-unquote state of grace. The material that I have just given you is necessary for any understanding of the ways in which massive doses of LSD can affect the individual. Here we are dealing with an artificial and forced method of hopefully bringing about physical, psychic, and spiritual illumination. Such enlightenment is supposed to lead to better health, self-knowledge, and provide an inner state of peace. Through such therapy, conscience is to be encountered and conquered once and for all. It is believed that the self must shed its ego and die symbolically in order that the inner self can be free. A discussion involving LSD, conscience, the quote-unquote death and birth of the self, mental health, and spiritual illumination may not seem applicable to those of you who have not taken drugs, but all of you do hope for illumination, greater vitality, and understanding in one way or another, and wonder what methods might help you achieve these ends. Much of this book will be devoted to various techniques that will help you change your own reality for the better. The next chapter will actually deal with a further discussion of some subjects that have been mentioned in this one. How aware can you be as an individual of your own greater reality? Can you use such knowledge beneficially to improve your daily life? If you are in serious difficulty, can LSD with therapy help you? Can a chemical open up the doorways to the soul? End of chapter.